This movie could have depicted an epic showdown between Spider-Man and his greatest enemy, but the creators decided that the villain's personal story would be even more interesting. The film spent over 20 years in development hell, going through numerous writers, but it was worth it. The movie was a massive commercial success and kicked off a trilogy about one of the most intriguing characters in the Marvel Universe. Movies Inside Out presents. Today, we'll talk about Venom, the 2018 superhero action film about journalist Eddie Brock, who becomes host to the symbiote Venom, granting him superhuman abilities. How did Tim Burton influence the creation of Venom? Why did the producers decide to remove almost all violent scenes? And what new species of animal was named after the movie? You'll find answers to these and other questions right now. The creation story. The story of Venom began in the mid-90s when producer Avi Arad, who worked on many Marvel comic adaptations, wanted to make a movie about Venom after noticing how well the character's action figures were selling. In 1997, David Goyer finished a script for the film, which was set to be produced by New Line Cinema. Dolph Lundgren was considered for the lead role, and Venom's main antagonist at the time was supposed to be Carnage. However, the project didn't move forward, and soon the rights to Venom, along with Spider-Man, were transferred to Sony Pictures. But they didn't rush to start production on a movie about the symbiote. In 2007, Arad convinced Sam Raimi, who was working on Spider-Man 3, to include Venom in his already event-filled and character-heavy film. Raimi wasn't particularly interested in Venom, but for Arad, it was important to introduce the character to the public before launching his future spin-off. However, fans of the franchise weren't impressed by Topher Grace's portrayal of Venom in Spider-Man 3, and the development of the spin-off was postponed yet again. Soon after, Jacob Aaron Estes, known for the indie drama Mean Creek, was hired to write a new script for Venom. However, the studio wasn't entirely satisfied with his work and decided to look for new screenwriters. They turned to Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese, who had written the screenplay for Deadpool. By the way, we've already covered the making of Deadpool on our channel. In 2009, Wernick and Reese proposed a darker version of Venom's story. In their script, the symbiote would take over one body after another, with the host becoming extremely violent, eventually passing the symbiote to one of its victims. Sony felt this version needed further refinement, so they brought in Gary Ross to rewrite the script. However, in 2010, the studio executives were more focused on rebooting Spider-Man, and the development of Venom stalled again, though they hadn't abandoned the project altogether. Soon, Ross left to work on The Hunger Games, and the director's chair piqued the interest of Josh Trank, who had directed Chronicle, but he later opted to helm Fantastic Four instead. After the release of The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012, producer Matt Tolmach joined Arad, and they began contemplating yet another concept for a Venom and Spider-Man film. But once again, production dragged on.
Wankers! Fucking embarrassing. Waste of our time. Fucking waste of our time.
In 2016, the studio executives returned to Venom, but this time, they wanted to create a new universe that would include various Marvel characters, not just those connected to Spider-Man. Sony also considered linking Venom's universe with Spider-Man, Homecoming, but ultimately decided to develop the Venom universe independently, without direct ties to Spider-Man or the broader Marvel universe. In 2017, the project finally gained momentum. The premiere of Venom was set for October 5th, 2018, and Scott Rosenberg and Jeff Pinkner began working on a new script with an R rating. In May, Tom Hardy was cast as Venom, and the director's chair was taken by Ruben Fleischer, known for his work on the horror comedy Zombieland. Around the same time, Kelly Marcel, known for Saving Mr. Banks and 50 Shades of Grey, began working on the final version of the script. According to Sony executives, they weren't interested in making a typical comic book movie. They wanted to give Venom its own unique style. The film was inspired by the works of John Carpenter and David Cronenberg, as well as An American Werewolf in London and Ghostbusters, while also being more mainstream and fun. Ruben Fleischer mentioned that his desire to make a superhero movie was sparked after watching Tim Burton's Batman. He was impressed by the film's dark tone, incredible design, and spectacular action sequences. Fleischer saw similar traits in the Venom script, which made him eager to take on the project. However, before he was chosen, the director's position could have gone to Adam Wingard or Rawson Marshall Thurber. For Fleischer, it was important to preserve Venom's brutality from the comics, where he bites off people's heads and eats their brains. However, the studio later decided to soften the rating to PG-13, significantly reducing the violent scenes to avoid issues with future crossovers involving Spider-Man's universe. With the concept finalized and Tom Hardy secured in the lead role, Sony began searching for actors to fill the supporting roles. Casting. Interestingly, Tom Hardy agreed to play Eddie Brock thanks to his son Louis, who was a big fan of Venom. Louis even helped his father prepare for the role, as he knew everything about the character. To prepare for Eddie, Hardy drew inspiration from Woody Allen's comedic neurosis, the impressive physical prowess of martial artist Conor McGregor, and the vibrant personality of rapper Redman. Notably, the voice of Venom also belongs to Hardy. According to the actor, he imitated the voice of James Brown when voicing the symbiote.
We are Venom.
Tatiana Maslany was initially considered for the role of Anne Wang, but the creators ultimately chose Michelle Williams. Williams, who had never acted in superhero films before, said her main reasons for accepting the role in Venom were her desire to enter the world of high-budget cinema and the opportunity to work alongside Tom Hardy, whose talent she deeply admires.
Oh no. I just bit that guy's head off.
Carlton Drake, who became the host for the symbiote riot, was played by Riz Ahmed. Other actors considered for the role included Matt Smith, Pedro Pascal, and Matthias Schoenaerts.
That hurts.
Sorry.
Long journal entry about that tonight. You're being dumb, Brock. I'm not insane. What's insane is the way humans choose to live today.
The character Dora Skirth, played by Jenny Slate, did not exist in the comics. She was created specifically for the movie. Initially, the role was written as male, but the casting department considered both men and women for many of the supporting roles.
My name is Doris Skirth. I need your help. I work at the Life Foundation.
You do?
Yes.
Wow. Good for you. We're done.
Woody Harrelson, who had worked with director Ruben Fleischer on Zombieland, agreed to take on the small role of Cletus Cassidy, the alter ego of Carnage, knowing that he would have a larger role in the sequel. Before Harrelson, actors like Jim Carrey, Michael Fassbender, Alan Tudyk, Walton Goggins, and Cameron Monaghan were considered for the role of Carnage.
I'll get out of here. And I will. There's gonna be carnage.
And, as is typical in Marvel comic book films, Venom wouldn't be complete without a cameo from Stan Lee, even though he wasn't the creator of Venom. Stan Lee can be seen at the very end of the film, playing an old man with a dog who encourages Eddie not to give up on Anne. This was notably the last film featuring Stan Lee that was released during his lifetime. Filming process. The filming of Venom took place in Atlanta, New York, and San Francisco from October 23, 2017 to January 26, 2018. Even before production began, Tom Hardy recorded the symbiote's lines. During scenes where Eddie Brock talks to Venom, Hardy listened to these lines through an earpiece. This idea was something the actor came up with during the filming of Legend, in which he played twin brothers. Hardy also worked closely with screenwriter Kelly Marcel to adjust some of Eddie and Venom's dialogues. The production designer for Venom was Oliver Scholl, who had previously worked on Spider-Man: Homecoming. According to Scholl, One of the most challenging aspects of his work on Venom was designing the offices of the Life Foundation. He aimed to create a creepy, dark atmosphere reminiscent of Stanley Kubrick's films. For the design of the futuristic laboratory, Scholl strived for maximum realism, though it was difficult, as he and his team only had 2 months to complete the work. The scene where Drake explains the corporation's achievements to children was filmed at a real location, the American Cancer Society headquarters in Atlanta. The Malaysian market scene was shot in a vacant lot in Georgia. Set decorator Larry Diaz and his team had to work hard, as the materials needed for the set were delivered on 25 trucks. To make the market look realistic, streetlights were dimmed, the asphalt was covered with dirt, and traditional Malaysian lamps, along with old mopeds and bicycles, were added. The visual effects for the film were handled by the British company D-Neg. Special effects supervisor Paul Franklin, an Oscar winner for his work on Inception and Interstellar, had his team study the movement of slimy molds, jellyfish, and amoebas to develop Venom's way of moving. The design of Venom and Riot was created by Paolo Giandoso, who drew concept art for DNAG's designers. Giandoso also created a storyboard of 158 drawings for the final battle between the symbiotes, although in his initial drawings, he replaced Riot with Carnage, who was likely saved for the sequel at the last moment. Venom, whose height is 7 feet 6 inches and weight is 507 pounds, was initially planned to be created using motion capture technology, with Hardy performing all the symbiote's movements. However, the shape of Hardy's face and height didn't fit the character, so Venom had to be animated entirely from scratch. On set, a tall stand-in actor wore a large helmet with a ball on top to help other actors know where Venom's eyes would be in the final version. This also helped the camera operators understand how much space Venom would take up on screen. Venom's eyes, which resemble those of an orca, were animated in an exaggerated way to show where Venom was looking, as he doesn't have pupils. And since Venom's origin in the film wasn't connected to Spider-Man, the creators opted to remove the white spider emblem. Instead, the symbiote's chest features a V symbol formed by white veins. Fleischer allowed Hardy to improvise on set, altering some scenes in the process. For example, Eddie wasn't originally supposed to end up in the lobster tank at the restaurant, but Hardy insisted that this scene be included. Since the tank wasn't built to support a person's weight and real lobsters could have been harmed, the crew quickly built a new tank filled with plastic lobsters. The lobster Eddie eats was made from marshmallow and chocolate. One of the major action scenes in the film was the motorcycle chase. The goal was to use as little CGI as possible, and it took around 4 months to complete the 4-minute sequence, during which about 40 cars were destroyed. All the motorcycle and car stunts were real. The scene where Eddie flies through the air on the motorcycle involved a stunt double, and although the jump wasn't as high as it appears, it was still life-threatening. In the scene where Eddie rides through a burning car, a stuntman drove through actual flames, though not on a real highway. The moment where Eddie loses control of the motorcycle was filmed on a soundstage with a blue screen and special harnesses lifting Hardy. The scene with the 2 SUVs flipping was created by combining 2 separate shots. In post-production, they merged footage of Hardy against a green screen with a real stunt car crash. Stunt coordinator Jack Gill shared some secrets of how they managed such dangerous filming. For instance, the car windows were replaced with high-strength Lexan plastic, the bodies were reinforced with additional frames, and fuel cells were used instead of regular tanks to prevent gasoline spills that could cause fires. The film is packed with references to the Spider-Man franchise and beyond. For example, Venom's line,
Eyes, lungs, pancreas. So many snacks, so little time.
was taken from the Amazing Spider-Man comics. That's also where the character John Jameson, an astronaut who dies during a mission, came from. The building where Brock lives is called Schuller, a nod to Randy Schuller, a Marvel Comics fan who, in 1982, suggested putting Spider-Man in a black suit. While that idea wasn't used for Spider-Man, it was perfect for Venom. Incidentally, Schuller never received a penny from Marvel for his idea. In the film, Carlton Drake wants to use symbiotes to cure cancer. In the Ultimate Universe, Venom was originally created to cure various diseases. There's also a scene where Venom asks Eddie for chocolate.
So, what culinary delights will tickle the pickle tonight?
Beetle tarts and chocolate.
Right, okay, no problem.
While this may seem like a strange request for a creature that eats people, according to the miniseries Venom: The Hunger, symbiotes need the chemical phenylethylamine, which is found in both human brains and chocolate. The name of Anne's law firm, Michelinier and McFarlane, is a nod to Venom's creators, David Michelini and Todd McFarlane. Eddie mentions that he's willing to write under a female pseudonym, referencing the movie Tootsie, where Dustin Hoffman disguises himself as a woman. Anne using Venom to save Eddie is a callback to the comics, where she also hosted the symbiote under the name She-Venom. Additionally, Anne calls certain frequencies Venom's kryptonite, referring to Superman's weakness in the DC universe. The cat owned by Eddie and Anne is named Belvedere, a reference to the sitcom Mr. Belvedere, which aired in the US from 1985 to 1990. At the end of the pre-credits scene, you can see a sign that says Ron Lim Herbal, referring to Ron Lim, an artist who worked on the first series of Venom comics. In the post-credits scene, Cletus Kasady says, "When I get out of here, and I will, there's gonna be carnage," foreshadowing his transformation into Carnage, whose name literally means slaughter. In 2012, Tom Hardy played the villain Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. Interestingly, in the comics, Bane takes a serum called Venom to gain super strength. The soundtrack for Venom was composed by Ludwig Göransson, who had previously worked with Fleischer on 30 Minutes or Less. In addition to the original score, the film features Eminem's song Venom. Both Tom Hardy and Riz Ahmed are fans of the rapper. Despite the movie's 1 hour and 52-minute runtime, the story ends about 20 minutes before the credits. The rest of the time is filled with credits and 2 additional scenes. Did you wait for them when you watched the movie? Movie mistakes and errors. Now let's count the numerous mistakes made by the creators of Venom. At the beginning of the film, a spaceship crashes into the ground at high speed, yet it doesn't disintegrate into tiny pieces. Even more surprising, the people inside look almost unharmed. A woman behind a computer only pretends to be typing. The ship crashes in Malaysia, where it's hot and humid year-round, yet we see characters' breath in the cold air. Additionally, there are no seasonal changes like fallen leaves in Malaysia. And because Malaysia has left-hand driving, the car's steering wheel should have been on the right side. A paramedic woman is wearing medical gloves, but they disappear when she exits the vehicle. The patch on her jacket also vanishes for a few seconds. When Eddie wakes up, the position of his pillow and pendant changes between shots. Eddie is just about to laugh, but a second later, he has a completely calm face. In the same scene, Eddie's hand first rests on the back of the couch, but then it suddenly disappears. Drake gives a girl his badge, but a minute later, it's back on his jacket. At the same time, the bench in front of the spaceship model is empty, but in an overhead shot, there's suddenly a child sitting there. The cameraman initially holds the camera with one hand, with its antennas pointing up. When the angle changes, he's holding it with both hands, and the antennas are tilted inward. A woman in a gray coat walks behind Anne, then passes her, but later she's seen walking behind Eddie again. When a box falls to the ground, something clearly flies out of it. But when Anne bends down to pick it up, there's nothing on the ground. A woman bites an eel, and part of it is sticking out of her fingers. In the next shot, it's fully hidden in her hand, but then it's visible again. Riot possesses an elderly woman in Malaysia and remains in her body for 6 months. What was he doing during all that time? And why didn't he switch hosts like he does later? Director Ruben Fleischer acknowledged that they overlooked Riot's storyline because they needed to focus on Eddie. He joked that the woman probably had a lot of fun killing everyone in her path. When Eddie talks to Maria, there are 2 boxes on a stool in the background, but in the next shot, the black box disappears. In this same scene, newspapers first appear on a raised platform, but are on the ground in the next shot. Eddie's neighbor, standing behind him, vanishes when the shot changes to inside the apartment. Eddie places a bag on the table, and the handles tilt to the side, but in the next shot, the bag is standing upright. Eddie's ring switches from his left hand to his right, then back to his left. The smartphone's status bar should have shown a network signal icon in addition to the battery level. Isaac inexplicably shields his eyes with his hands while peering into a window, even though the people outside are clearly visible. Eddie peeks out from behind a shelf with his head tilted to the left. But in the next shot, he's standing straight. Meanwhile, Maria's head changes positions between shots. When Eddie pushes off the wall, the door, which was right next to him before and after this shot, disappears. Eddie and Skirth arrive at the base at night and spend only a short time there. But when Eddie runs outside, it's already morning. Eddie is in full view of the guards, but he suddenly and quickly appears on top of a tree unnoticed. Eddie places his phone on the table near the fridge, but a second later, it's moved to the other end of the table. In the same scene, Eddie opens and closes first the bottom and then the top compartments of the fridge, but later, both compartments are open. In the lab, Eddie took horizontal photos of Maria, but later, some of the photos appear vertically. The sound frequency emitted by the MRI machine disrupts the symbiote, but MRI machines don't use sound frequencies that could harm it. Knives in the background change positions between shots, and a knocked-over trash can, which was in front of the chair, moves behind it. Trish should have fallen feet first toward the chair, but he falls feet first toward the couch. In the next shot, he's lying in the correct position, and seconds later, he's between the chair and the couch. Bullets make a loud clinking noise when they hit the floor, like shell casings, though they should have made a dull sound or none at all, since the floor is carpeted. A mirror appears on Eddie's motorcycle for a moment, although it was not there before or after. Drake orders Trish to bring back his creation, implying he wants Brock alive, yet Trish aggressively tries to kill Eddie with drones. A drone crashes into the rear of a car, flipping it into the air, but after the explosion, the car's body is inexplicably unscathed. The same goes for the door, which remains undamaged by the explosion. In that same scene, Tom Hardy's stunt double is clearly visible. Trish says Eddie is traveling east on Grant Avenue, but Grant Avenue in San Francisco runs north to south, not east to west. Eddie and his pursuers drive past the Rialto Theater several times. Brock turns onto a one-way street, but in the next shot, it becomes a two-way street. An SUV crashes into 2 cars, damaging its bumper and headlights, but moments later, it's perfectly intact. A black car on the right suddenly turns into a silver one, and in the background, a group of people can be seen watching the film crew. Eddie's arm is stretched up in one shot, but bent at the elbow in the next. Dan's phone and tablet switch places between shots. At the same time, Dan discusses Brock's test results with Anne. Even though this violates patient confidentiality and could cost him his medical license. When Anne calls Eddie and he doesn't answer, Venom asks who Anne is. But earlier, Venom said he knew everything about Eddie, so he should have known who she was. Eddie summons the elevator from the 8th floor, but the office is clearly much higher up. In some shots, Venom towers over people by several heads, while in others, he's the same height as them. Loose metal objects couldn't have been in the same room as an MRI machine due to its strong magnetic field. A stool and a stand fall over on their own, and a rack with blue crates shifts in the opposite direction. A dog watches as the villains drag Eddie down an empty hallway, but in the next shot, the hallway is full of people. The rocket launch timer is set for 5 minutes, but the engines ignite at 5:25. Venom quickly burns up in the fire, but Eddie remains unharmed. A man with a backpack who should have disappeared from view walks past the heroes again, and a passerby in a green shirt suddenly vanishes in the next shot. When Brock enters the store, it's daytime, but a few minutes later, it's night. This mistake can be explained though. When Eddie starts walking toward the store, the sun is setting, and his walk could have taken about half an hour as he was walking slowly. Cletus Cassidy writes a message to Eddie with his own blood, yet there are no visible injuries on him, so where did he get all that blood? Did you notice any of these inconsistencies, or were you too busy enjoying the movie? Deleted scenes. In an interview, Tom Hardy mentioned that around 40 minutes of material didn't make it into the final cut of Venom, including some of his favorite scenes. In another instance, he even said there were 7 hours of unused footage. Either way, a lot of potentially interesting and important scenes were cut from the movie. Unfortunately, most of these deleted scenes were never released, except for a few moments. Other sequences are known only through brief descriptions, so we can use our imagination to fill in the gaps. For example, Hardy talked about crazy puppeteering scenes, likely referring to moments where Eddie struggles with the symbiote as it gradually takes control of his body. The movie also could have included more dark humor and violent scenes, but Sony's push for a nearly kid-friendly rating forced the director to cut many important moments that contributed to the film's tone. Later, critics would criticize the movie for its uneven storytelling, but more on that later. It's possible that some of the deleted material might have answered many of the questions that arise while watching the movie. For instance, why are there no security cameras in Drake's lab? Why doesn't Eddie seem at all surprised when he runs up walls or leaps over fences, despite never having done anything like that before? Or why can't Venom break a simple glass window in the MRI office? The film has its fair share of plot holes, but it's unclear whether these issues resulted from missing scenes or just the oversight of the multiple screenwriters involved. It's also known that the opening scene of Venom was much longer and more interesting in the script. Had it been filmed, we would have seen the shuttle crew, including John Jameson, discovering a comet filled with symbiotes and collecting 4 of them as samples to bring back to Earth. Additionally, according to director Ruben Fleischer, the movie could have included a scene set on the symbiote's home planet. What do you think? Which scenes should have been added to improve the movie? Share your ideas in the comments. Worldwide recognition. Venom premiered on October 1st, 2018, at the Regency Village Theater in Los Angeles, and it was widely released in the US and Canada on October 5th in 4,250 theaters. Interestingly, its release coincided with the 30th anniversary of the character's debut in comic books. The movie grossed $213.5 million in the US and Canada, and $642.5 million internationally, bringing its total worldwide earnings to over $856 million on a $100 million budget. With a net profit of $246.9 million after marketing expenses and taxes, Venom became the 6th most profitable film of 2018 and outperformed any Spider-Man film at the time. Tom Hardy earned $7 million for his role. In 2023, a new species of Australian spider was named Venomius tomhardi after the movie and its lead actor, as the spider's black and white markings resemble Venom's face. Despite its box office success, critics gave Venom a lukewarm reception, calling it dull, chaotic, and incoherent. They also criticized the directing and special effects. Hardy's performance received mixed reviews, though the relationship between Eddie and Venom was praised and described as one of the film's few highlights. The film didn't collect numerous awards or nominations, but it was nominated for an MTV Movie Award for Best Kiss and won the Taurus World Stunt Award for Best Work with a Vehicle. Even before Venom was released, Sony had plans for a franchise that would potentially merge with the Spider-Man universe. By August 2018, Hardy had already signed on for 2 more films. The movie's box office success pleased the studio, and production on Venom 2 began in January 2019. Kelly Marcel wrote the script, and the main cast returned. The sequel, which premiered on September 14, 2021, was both a commercial hit and received a warmer critical reception than the first film. After the second film, development on the final part of the trilogy, Venom: The Last Dance, began. This time, Marcel not only served as the screenwriter, but also directed, with Hardy actively involved in shaping the storyline. The premiere of Venom 3 is scheduled for October 25, 2024. However, a crossover with Spider-Man remains in Sony's future plans. Are you looking forward to seeing these iconic characters in one film? Or do you prefer Venom's independent storyline?